Good morning, and welcome to another episode of Flip Classroom with Mrs. Bond. Okay, so today we are going to discuss Standard 3, which is I can analyze how complex characters, events, and ideas develop and interact over the course of a text to impact meaning by using a graphic organizer and writing an objective summary. Remember that we will be using the graphic organizer and writing an objective summary in class, as well as doing a lot of our reading. So, what I need for you to do now is to go grab your spiral notebook. I need for you to write this objective in your spiral notebook and these three questions in your spiral notebook, and also take any other notes that you need. Remember, my cue phrase is if I were you, I would. Anytime you hear me say that, that means do exactly what I basically cued you to do. So, if I were you, I would write down these key terms. Many of the key and important words that we will be looking at in the standard is analyze, character, events, ideas, complex, develop, interact, impact, and meanings. These terms will help us to better understand the standard. For example, we know that analyze means to break something down to see how they all work together. So if we're going to analyze, it means we're going to break down the complexity of the character. We're going to break down the events and the ideas. And we're going to see how all three of these things connect and to help build and push the story forward. Also, how our character matures. We're also going to see how they interact with each other throughout the text. In other words, how does the event help shapes the character? How does the ideas of the character helps to create events? We're going to see how they connect together. And also, we're going to look and see how these connections create meaning. In other words, how does these interactions creates events which helps us to learn lessons from our characters. And then, of course, objective means facts only. And we'll dive into that in class. All right, so if I were you, I will write this down. So I will pause right here and I will write this down. But I'm going to go through this. So basically, what we're talking about is character development and interactions. When we're talking about character development, we're talking about how the character matures. Again, we're talking about how the character matures, how the character changes from the beginning of the text to the middle of the text, to the end of the text. We're looking at how the author uses details that shows this character's growth. For example, in seventh grade, you all read A Long Walk to Water. So how does Salva's encounter with his uncle motivates him throughout the text? Okay? So one of the first things that we have to do is we have to analyze our character. We're looking at the characteristics of our character. And you have indirect characterization and you have direct characterization. Direct characterization is when the author comes outright and basically tells you about this character. Indirect characterization causes us to infer. So we're going to have to read between the lines. So we know that all stories have a protagonist or antagonist. Protagonist, main character. Antagonist is the opposing character or element that goes against our main character. Do not think that antagonist is automatically the bad guy. That is not true. It depends on the perspective of, well, it depends on who's telling that story. And we'll go deeper into that in class. All right, so what we're going to be using is the steal method. We're going to look at what the character says, thoughts, the effects that this character have on other people, the actions, and how the character looks. Again, we're looking for how the character matures, how the character actions creates events important to the story, and how those interactions help shape the text itself. So let's go deeper into our steal method. I provided a few examples here over the next two slides. So we're looking at speech. Remember, we're looking at what uh, is revealed about the character's personality. We're looking at the complexity of this character. So, speech, what the character says, and how. We're looking at the tone that the character uses. We're looking at the word choice. Why did the character use this word knowing that it has a negative connotation versus using this word that has a positive connotation? So, here's an example. So this money for your trip, it comes out of your clothes budget, right? Gabe, this is Gabe from the Lightning Thief. So it sounds like Gabe, we're gonna infer that Gabe is very selfish. He's a greedy husband to Sally, who is Percy's mom. He's talking about your clothes budget. It's your trip. In other words, I don't want to pay for that. You got some money to pay for that. All right, so then we're going to look at the thoughts. Again, the thoughts uh, are not what's spoken. So you have to know the difference between dialogue and non dialogue. Dialogue will always be in quotations because that's when the character is saying it outright. Okay, so um, this is Percy. He says, my mother can make me feel good just by walking in the room. Her eyes sparkle and change color in the light. Her smile is a warm is as warm as a quilt. Percy from the lightning. So what does this say? Percy, when he's with his mother, he feels secure, he feels confident, he feels loved. His mother is loving, she's caring, she's kind, she's beautiful. And this is simply by us analyzing what Percy's thought told us. We looked at my mother can make me feel good. Well, what is it when somebody make you feel good that lets you know that what? They care about you, right? All right. So then we look at effects on others. And we have a different story here, but not buddy, something that you all read in the sixth grade. And the effects on others is basically um, how the character behaves or reacts to another character and how that character feels. Okay? So I can't, well, you can really read this, but I'm going to read this one. I'm not going to read the other two. I can't all the way blame Todd for giving me trouble, though. If I had a regular home with a mother and a father, I wouldn't be too happy about other kids living in my house either. So, what is this doing? What can we infer? We can infer that Bud doesn't necessarily always put others before himself, but we can see but he can see other people's perspective, even in a tough situation. So he's able to see, okay, this is how he's able to put himself in Todd's shoes. Now, on the flip side, if we were analyzing Todd, how does Todd make Bud feel? That is another way that we could do this. How does one character make another character feel, and what does that tell us about that character? All right, so action. Basically, we're looking at what the character does and the behavior looks. We're looking at an example of the clothing, the description, the eyes, how they stand. We're looking at all of that. And all of those things give us clues about the character. So once we've done that, once we've analyzed, we are going to look at the conflict or the motivations or the interactions that the character, our character, have with other characters. And so when we're talking about motivation, we're talking about what drives the character. Why does the character think and behave and act this way? We're looking at the conflict. The conflict are the issues within the person or the issues that come from the character and something else, an outside force. That's why we have internal conflict and external conflict. We also have internal response and external response. And basically, an internal response is how we respond inwardly to a conflict. How do we feel about it? What are our thoughts behind it? And what this does, this helps us to understand why the character is the way the character is, why the character does what the character do. So the internal response help us to understand the character's motivation. The external response, it helps to create plot. When we're talking about plot, we're talking about events that happen in the story. So the external response helps to drive the plot. So, for example, if my sister slapped me in my face, my internal response would be to cry. I will be hurt. My external response may be to slap my sister back. Well, what does that do? That could possibly create a fight. So that is an event within the story that creates an event. So when we're looking at that, we have to look at the character, the conflicts, the motivations, the actions, and the interactions with people. You all read the Three Little Pigs. One of the characters is the wolf. Well, what's his conflict? It is the wolf versus the pigs, or as he see it, the pigs versus him. Well, what's his motivation? Well, why do we have this conflict? Well, we know that he was hungry, he need food to survive, and he saw the pigs as weak. Well, what was the actions? Well, he kind of killed two pigs, depending on what story you read. He vandalized their home. And what were the interactions with the pigs? It was hostile, it was volatile, it was threatening. Same thing with Percy Jackson, which you can come back and you can read this because you can pause this lesson. So when we're looking at character development, we need to understand that all of these things work together. So we're looking at the interactions, the events, the conflicts, and the motivations. All of these things work together to push the story forward. There is really not a cut and dry way to have you to do it. You could choose by analyzing the conflicts of a character first, and then you can see, well, what events does the conflict create? Well, how does this conflict create interactions? How does this conflict motivate our character to do something else? Now, the way that we look at it is we can also look at what happens in the story and why did it happen? What happened with the three little pigs? Well, the pigs were murdered. Two of the pigs were murdered. Why did it happen? What was the internal response of the wolf? Remember that the character reactions create external events. It creates plots. It creates situations. Okay. Now these turn into internal thoughts and feelings, which then can motivate the character from the text to take an outward action, to take an inward action. And all of these things work together to push our story forward. So let's recap our steps quickly or recap what we learned. So we learned that interactions, events, conflicts, and motivations all work together to create a story and they help us with character development. We learned that we're looking at how the character matures, how the character's actions creates events. Here we go, all of this connects, and how the character interactions with other characters shape the text. What do? We analyze using STILL. What else? We determine the motivations of the characters. We looked at the events. We also looked at how these events created new events. And then we learned what lessons from our characters. And we know that those lessons are themes. A topic that we saw in the text plus the lesson learned equal our theme. Thank you. See you in class.